and the east. You must let my people go, so we can rule from Cape to Cairo. You must free my people's hands, so we can rule our purpose land. I wanna know who owns the land. Who wanna know who owns the land? Okay, now listen carefully. Chinese are ruling the Chinese land. Japan is ruled by Japanese. England is governed by Englishmen. America is governed by Americans. So, Africa must be ruled by Africans. I wanna know who owns the land. We must rule from Cape to Cairo. We must rule our purpose land. I said, we want to know who owns the land. I want to know who owns the land. Hey, Papa's land. Papa's land. Papa's land.
I'd like to say good evening and welcome all of you on ground zero from Inkambe all the way to Fako. I want to say thank you for joining, and I want to believe you had a wonderful weekend. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special broadcast tonight. Before I forget, let me welcome those of you in the diaspora, in Europe, in Asia, in the continental USA plus Canada, and of course South America. I always said here, we should not forget we have lots of Ambazonians, Southern Cameroonians, out there in Mexico, in Brazil, all of Southern America. We've got a lot of Ambazonians in these communities who are there struggling to enter the USA. I hope you are all watching me by way of your computer or by way of your gadgets. Fellow Ambazonians, good evening. We have been told again and again that in this life, opportunity comes only once. But in our case, the destiny of the Southern Cameroons, God continues to be so gracious to us. In 1961, we had the opportunity to make our own country. We had the opportunity in Fumban to complete the decolonization process of our country, the Southern Cameroons, Ambazonia. It never happened. For that, we have blamed our ancestors and continue to blame them for the predicament, the mess that became of the Cameroons, which is the reason for this senseless war forced upon all of us, and for which our young ones continue to give their lives for. If Fumban was an opportunity gone, today, ladies and gentlemen, is an opportunity before all of us to take back what was lost. And that's perhaps why we call ours a God-ordained revolution. God, in his infinite mercy and grace, once more is at this time giving us yet another chance to grab back what we forfeited in Fumban out of naivety. Perhaps after today, ladies and gentlemen, and when I say today, I mean this time, this period, this hour, our generation, after this conflict, if we should fail to do the right thing, to put bickering, divisive tendencies, put grandstanding and power projection and tribalistic activism aside, if we fail to end sabotage and conspiracies that aim at derailing the revolution because your man or your leader or your tribesman isn't making the rules or dictating the direction that the wind blows. If we fail again this time like in Fumban, John Ngu Foncha and Solomon Tandeng Mona would have forever been vindicated, because the buck now ends with this present generation of Southern Cameroon's leaders. If after this war we should still go back to assume the place of second-class citizens as being touted around in their special status, we have ourselves to blame, and no more Foncha or Mona. And let me tell you what happens a few years down the road from today. Our children's children, when they read the history, shall not ask why the Fonchas let us down. Rather, they shall be asking how you and me, the leaders of this new opportunity, of this new dispensation, let us down. This monologue is very important in the face of the current opportunity being offered us by the Swiss government, the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, and the rest of the international community to not only find a lasting settlement to this war conflict and the Southern Cameroon's question, but one that goes back to the roots of the problem. A few weeks ago, Yaoundé, in effort to counter the Swiss initiative and to assuage the wrath of the international community over their genocide in our country upon our people, offered a sham, a concoction, and a fraud in the guise of national dialogue. At the end of the day, when it was all over, all said and done, it became very apparent that the outcome has no legs, no antidote, no real and practical solutions to the conflict or the war. The colonial regime in Yaoundé had, in rushing their dialogue in place, hoped that the resolutions would be appealing and would cause us to lay down our arms in surrender. They had hoped that such a result or outcome would then displace the Swiss government and HD initiative aimed at facilitating a settlement. It failed. Everything is back to square one, back on table. I guess the Swiss and the international community can now say they still have the knife and the yam over what becomes of the fate of this conflict or war. But as suggested in the preceding paragraphs, French Cameroon in its characteristics divide and rule ploy appears to be working extra hard, using some among us in this restoration quest who come across as honest and sincere to set confusion or want to set confusion and sabotage. They have asked a number of questions ranging from the neutrality of the Swiss government in the process to the commitment of French Cameroon in the initiative. And they, just as every other Ambazonian, deserve the right to know exactly what this Swiss initiative is all about. The problem, however, is trying to claim custody of all knowledge, all knowing, whereas that knowledge is based mostly on allegations. It is in view of these, ladies and gentlemen, that I invited one of the main persons at the center of the Swiss initiative to come on ABC with answers to every question lingering in the mind of every Ambazonian about the Swiss initiative. Have no doubt that I know exactly what is at stake in any negotiation that seeks to decide the fate of 8 million of us. Even though I serve in the interim government, which has fully endorsed the Swiss initiative, I want you to trust that I will ask the right questions that every concerned Ambazonian would want to ask if you or she was sitting right here. I have not been part of any of the Swiss pre-talks that have taken place so far. Myself, I am eager to get the answers, just as you all are. I'm meeting Alex Libinsky for the first time. For the record, Alex is the Africa Director of the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, a Swiss-based NGO. He's joining me live from Nairobi in Kenya. So, ladies and gentlemen, Alex, again, it's a pleasure to have you here on set on ABC, Ambazonian Broadcasting Television with me, sir. It's a pleasure to have you.
Secretary Anu, I'm honored to be here, and I'm ready to answer your questions.
Thank you. Thank you. I will start with some definitions of terminologies. We have heard of mediators when it comes to the Swiss initiative. We hear of mediators, we hear of facilitators. Which one are you?
We are mediators. That is, we broker negotiations that aim at agreeing on a settlement that is binding for the parties. A facilitator usually manages a dialogue, and a dialogue is not necessarily geared towards an agreement that is signed by both parties. So it's a fundamental difference. Negotiators, each party will have its negotiators, both the unions and the government of Cameroon. So we are clearly mediators in this case.
All right. So you are mediators. You are mediators.
We are.
All right. Now, as mediators, what is your role as mediators?
Our role is to structure a negotiation, is to assist the parties in finding solutions, is to bring the parties a little closer to a settlement, and is to form a coalition around the peace process, which will be made of states, international organizations, civil society organizations that can support the process and that can encourage the parties to get to a negotiation.
Okay. Now, you have held a number of pre-talks with Ambazonian leaders. I think about other 3 or 4 of them already. I don't know whether you have held similar pre-talks with French Cameroon. Can you enlighten our people what these pre-talks have all been about?
Sure. Pre-talks are conferences that are held separately with the parties, between the mediator and the parties. And each of the talks, there were representatives of the Swiss diplomacy and representatives of HD. Pre-talks are to run the peace through the different stages of a peace process and are meant to help them to prepare a negotiation strategy. And that negotiation strategy will ensure the success of talks. pre-talks are also used to help the parties to unite, to name negotiators, to give them a negotiation mandate that is as clear as possible. Because when parties are united, when parties speak with one voice, the chances of success of the negotiations are much greater. In the case of Ambazonia and Cameroon, we have on the one side a rather monolithic, I would say, party, the government. On the other side, have a party which is multipolar, that is with several organizations and several leaders which are spread around the globe. And so there is work to do with all the representatives of the Ambazonians to make sure that their representation is legitimate, is coherent, and is a reliable negotiation partner. And I believe we have come a long way in creating a coalition on the side of Ambazonians that make of your people a credible interlocutor for the government of Cameroon.
All right. If I may have you take a moment, listen to this footage that I am about to play here, and listen to it a little attentively. I will have a question to ask stemming from that footage. Now, listen.
Now, during that Zoom conference, the Swiss officials already wanted us to, at the end of it, issue a mandate for them, grant them a mandate. And that is when some confusion came in. Some of us on the call did not know that this was about giving Switzerland a mandate. That is where we were informed that they had had a mandate from La République du Cameroun and they needed us to give them our own mandate.
All right, you have heard that. What Mr. Akoro is saying here, that in the very first meeting, pre-talks, that you initiated with them referring to the Southern Cameroon leaders, it turned out from his understanding that you and the Swiss, your organization, the HD and the Swiss, were merely acting as a proxy for the French, which means, referring to France. What do you have to say about this allegation, sir?
For power, this nuclear weapons really needs proxies. France is not a party to this negotiation. This is a process between the government of Cameroon and the separatists of Ambazonia. France has nothing to do with this process, and I would be happy to hear from Mr. Akuro in what we would have shown by our acts or words, that in a way or another we would be defending the interests of France or any other third state that has a stake in this conflict. So the answer is no. The Swiss government and HD are acting independently in this process, and they are acting on the request of the parties.
Now, have you spoken with the French, or have the French reached out to HD with any contributions or endorsement to this process? Because we know the Americans, for example, we have heard from them. We have heard from the Canadians. We've heard from the EU. We've heard, of course, France is part of the EU. But we've heard from London. The USA, they have said categorically, they stand, they support this Swiss initiative, beg your pardon. Have you received any word from the French in this regard in any area?
We are in constant dialogue with France as with all other states that have an interest in finding a solution to the conflict in Cameroon. France has decided not to express itself publicly on the process. We took note of their position, but we have an ongoing dialogue with France, and France has not been hostile to the process.
When you say they have not been willing to express themselves publicly about this, what are they hiding? Why can't they step out like the Americans, the UK, the Canadians, and say, or the EU as a whole, and say, we endorse the Swiss process? Are they saying anything different from this?
This is a sovereign decision of the French diplomacy and the government of France, on which I cannot really comment. In the end, the states decide to take public positions or they decide to take confidential positions. In the case of France, there was not to talk publicly about the process, and this is a question you should ask French diplomats.
All right. Many Ambazonians would want to know how your organization, the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, how did you come into playing this role in the first place? Because if you listen to Mr. Akuro said you were acting as a proxy for French Cameroon, and so you have said no, that is not the case. So Ambazonians then would want to know, how did you come about playing this role?
We were approached by some of the Ambazonian groups by December last year, who required Switzerland to test the waters for opening a channel of negotiation with the government of Cameroon. Switzerland turned to us as we have a wealth of experience in dealing with mediations involving non-state actors and multipolar actors, and we decided to team up together. Our initial decision was to make sure that we had the buy-in from the government of Cameroon. So we approached the government, and the government gave us the go-ahead to take contact and put together a negotiation. So we did not ask on the request of any third party, but on the request of the parties to conflict in between Cameroon and Ambazonia. This being said, it has been a long process, and it has been a long process because, I repeat, on the side of the Ambazonians, you have several organizations. There has been endless disputes and rivalries between these organizations as to whether to join the process or not. We have been mere spectators of that. We have had an open door policy to all those who are willing to join the process, and it has taken time and it has taken a lot of energy, which, in my opinion, would be better spent in actually getting prepared for the negotiation.
In this arrangement, who decides? Who decides? Is it the Ambazonians, or in other words, these other groups? Who decide? Who becomes part of the process? I mean, on the side of Ambazonians, is it you telling them, hey, that group, this group, or that other group has to be part of this, or the Ambazonians are deciding that?
We did our homework. That is, we tried to understand who was who in this process, and we extended a very open invitation. And some of the invitees have suggested, and we invited others. So we have not censored or limited the participation pre-talks. Now, what is important is that the parties to the talks actually represent the party conflict. And I believe that we have reached out to all those who have an influence on the conflict and have an influence on finding a solution to the conflict. It is, of course, much more difficult to reach out to those field commanders on ground zero, but we have also extended efforts to make sure, I repeat, that the negotiator representing the Ambazonians is legitimate, that he represents the coalition as extensive and representative as possible on the forces of the ground, but also of the civil society and of the communities that are suffering and that are being affected by the conflict. So we do not invite or not invite people. We have open and we have sent an open invitation, and those who are willing to participate are welcome. Those who are not willing to participate, again, we take note, but it is their choice and we respect that choice.
Now, when you say, you mentioned about ground zero, invitations to ground zero, have you invited anyone on ground zero?
We have invited those who can represent the ones on ground zero. Now, as you know, the security situation is such that it would not be prudent today to, a way or another, try to get representatives of ground zero and field commanders to travel. But these are typically the kind of things that need to be discussed directly between the parties, and that can constitute measures of confidence that would help the process to get to go forward.
Now, there are allegations that the Swiss government is issuing some travel documents for some Ambazonian fighters to be able to travel to Switzerland for for these talks when the moment comes. Are you doing that? Is HD doing that? Is the Swiss government doing that?
Even if we wanted, or if the Swiss or HD wanted, there is no way a government can issue a travel document for a citizen of another state. Documents are a very precise mechanism that allows refugees to travel back home at the end of a conflict. It's a one-way document, and it's a document that can be issued exclusively by the International Committee of the Red Cross or by the United Nations Office of Refugees. So there is no way Switzerland can issue travel documents or can issue passports to people who are not Swiss citizens. The answer is no. What Switzerland can do and has been doing is visas to make sure that people can travel to Switzerland and issue these visas in the best possible conditions for the participants. But there has been no issuance of travel documents.
And in other words, you are also saying in the future the Swiss would not be issuing any travel documents to anyone leaving ground zero to attend these talks in Switzerland.
I repeat, Switzerland cannot issue travel documents for people who are not Swiss citizens. So it's a no-no. It did not happen, to say the truth.
All right. I will like you again take a moment, listen to this second footage that I like to play. So take a listen, please.
Because we refuse to listen to expert advice. Because we want it to go on record that I was there, I signed on to it, I took that initiative. When the Swiss were calling and putting pressure for that second meeting and wanted only leaders, I talked to the Swiss officials. I talked to Alexander Lepseski, and I told him I felt the timing was not the best. I told him I felt it made sense for our people to have enough time to do broad-based consultations and at least have the backing.
All right, all right. I hope you got that. Do you remember this conversation with Mr. Akuro?
I have had one conversation with him a while ago, which was followed by a few rather unpleasant messages from him. I would say this. We reached out to the parties at the beginning of this year. We are now end of October. A lot of time has passed. We have given 3 opportunities to Ambazonian leaders to gather in Switzerland. And I feel that this should have been ample time enough to get them to talk together and to constitute a negotiation platform. So those who came on board did get to constitute the ACT platform, Ambazonian coalition team, which is a great step forward towards the negotiation. But you know, in peace processes, momentum is key. We had a momentum at the beginning of this year to go to negotiations, and I feel more time is spent arguing between various groups, between various representatives of the diaspora. The momentum for negotiations may pass, and it is a history that the momentum for negotiation is not always open. It can close tomorrow, it can reopen further down the line, but I feel that almost a year of talks and discussions and disputes and meetings on the side of the ambassadors have been enough to come to terms. At the end of the day, let us never forget that there are people suffering on ground zero, that there are people mourning on the ground zero, that people who have high expectations on this process, and they not be deceived. I feel it is our responsibility to go ahead. So we cannot go quicker than the parties, but I encourage the parties to get their act together and try to get to that negotiation table as soon as possible.
Now, meeting with them for the second time, just the second time, and you were asking for their commitment. I think what Mr. Akuro is saying that is they felt like they were under pressure to make a commitment, meeting you just for the second time. And they were in doubt as to whether La République du Cameroun, French Cameroon, has given you that same commitment.
I understand. There's 2 points in your question. The first point is, was it too hasty to commit to the negotiations on the second meeting? Again, it was the decision of the participants to the meeting. We do not force, we do not even have the means to force any of the participants, any of the Ambazonian leaders to commit to something they would not want. I was happy that they decided to commit the dialogue publicly by ways of a press release, but I would not have pushed for it if they were not ready for it. A good mediator picks up the fruit when the fruit is ready to be picked up. If you pick up an apple and the apple resists, it is not ready to be picked up. So we are acutely aware of the importance of not pushing the parties to commit to something they are not ready to commit to. We felt after the second meeting in Switzerland that the parties had reached an agreement and were ready to engage, and so we were happy that they did so. But again, it was their decision and not our decisions. Now, bear in mind that, I repeat, weeks and months have elapsed, and in between meetings, thousands of messages have been exchanged between the mediation, the parties themselves, and there has been ample time for discussions. Mr. Akuro, as others, was in invited in these meetings. He knows it. He decided to. This is his decision. I respect it. But I do not agree with him when he says that we have been pushing the pace, or that we have been going in a pace that was not reasonable. Your second question is about the commitment of
before you get to the second
Sure.
question, I think as part of the first question, they were also interested to know if at the moment you needed a commitment from them. French Cameroon, or that is actually part of the second question, whether French Cameroon had already made a commitment to the initiative.
The government of in Yaoundé has committed to the initiative early on. That is back in January or February. I'm not exactly sure. As is often the case with state actors, their commitment has not been expressed publicly. And you will find in states dealing with a non-state actor, with armed opposition groups or armed separatist groups or rebels or guerrillas or what have you, that their public commitment will come relatively late in the process, because states all over the world want to keep a certain measure of deniability. So in a way, the thing about the commitment, the public commitment of the participants to the Saint-Luc meetings of the Ambazonian leaders that are on board, was that it allowed then the international community to officially support the process by ways of declarations. These declarations that you mentioned from several states, including the US, the European, Canada, the United Nations, and others. So you will often find a different style and a different pace between non-state actors, state actors, and it should not be a cause for much worries. Now, rest assured to the fact that if we had not been mandated by both the Ambazonians and the government of Cameroon, we would not have invested so much resources, so much diplomatic networking for this process. We are professional mediators, and we know all too well that mediators who engage in peace process without being mandated by the government usually, and at some stage, have to withdraw, or are simply lying to the parties by letting them understand that they have a mandate, but they have no mandate. Now, if you have a doubt as to the veracity of our mandate, last time we met with the Prime Minister in Yaoundé. There was a press conference organized.
Now, I'm sorry, before we get there, we're going to get back with your meeting with the Prime Minister. But you said it is no, state actors do not always want to make their intentions known or public. Is this what is this what you have seen in other mediations that you have conducted around the world? And if you can give us some examples, that would be awesome.
I've been involved in mediations where both parties publicly deny that there is a process ongoing, while the process is actually ongoing. And the reason for that is usually they are not sure about the willingness of the other party to negotiate, or they are not ready to break the news to their own constituency that now is the time for negotiation. So I would say it is quite usual. There has been, for instance, a process between Sand and Puntland where for months on end the parties would not publicly acknowledge that they were secretly negotiating through HD, if you take the process between Spain and the Basque separatists that failed during at least a year. There has been secret meetings between representatives of Spain and representatives of ETA, the Basque separatists, and both parties were denying that they were in talks. So I would say it's a usual figure. It is not ideal. I understand the doubts of those who have not seen a public declaration by the government of Cameroon, but what I can say is that to this date, we have had the go-ahead of Yaoundé. It could change tomorrow. The Ambazonians could also decide to withdraw tomorrow, and we will acknowledge. Again, we are a broker in this. We are a go-between, and we can only work with the consent of both parties.
Now let's go back to your meeting with the Prime Minister of French Cameroon. You had a meeting with him. We all saw it over their network. What was the promise? What was the promise he gave you? And what did you perceive? Do you see them as willing parties to come to table?
The meeting with the Prime Minister was mainly focused on the dialogue and just making sure that the national dialogue and the Swiss-led process not somehow overlapping or somehow having adverse effects on each other. So we made clear that there was one process which was the national dialogue, and then one process which was the Swiss-led peace process. That was the main.
And what did they tell you was the difference between their national dialogue and the Swiss dialogue?
The national dialogue is an exercise whereby the government, as you could see, invited a number of stakeholders, listened to their grievances, and unilaterally, if you like, propose some reforms and some recommendations. So you are not dealing with a process where you have two symmetric parties somehow that are sitting and that negotiate solutions. And national dialogues are again a usual, I would say, mechanism solve political crisis, but it is of a completely different nature than a peace negotiations between two or more parties to a conflict.
All right. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, the audio, Alexis' audio is not the best, but we just manage what we have. We have no option here. Alex, let me come to you with a second clip that I would love you to listen and then respond to. It is another clip here from Mr. Akuro. Please listen to it.
Sound knowledge about international negotiations before coming. When I talked to Patrick, still of the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, I told him, please, can we have 2 more weeks? Can we push this meeting forward by 2 weeks so we have time at least to do some consultations? And he told me, look, we want to seal this thing very fast. There are a lot of other countries, you know, showing interest in this thing. We should close it quickly. We need to close it quickly so that we avoid this disturbance from other partners wanting to come in. My dear brothers and sisters, and I asked myself, is it in my interest to make sure I wait off other partners, other parties, other interested parties in the interest of Switzerland that doesn't even want us to do consultations?
All right. So essentially, Mr. Mba is saying you made it known to them that other parties were interested in coming into this initiative in their own way, but you were essentially kind of adding pressure to see that they just go along with you, with your initiative. Is that true? Is that what happened?
What happened is that at a certain stage, we agreed that we should meet, and then, as in any meeting involving dozens of people on 5 continents, you have to find a date that is suitable to the largest number. Now, I have a few doubts that giving 2 more weeks would have solved anything, because we are now several months later, and obviously between Mr. Akuro and the leaders of ACT is not ended. So I'm sorry if Mr. Akuro felt that we were pressuring him. The dates that we agreed upon were agreeable to the most. They were allowing for the most of them to participate. We opened the conference to teleconference, so anybody was welcome to participate by teleconference. I would like also to remind you that there have been attempts by some followers, I don't know who, to discredit these meetings by saying that it was a trap, that people would be killed or poisoned or corrupted or what have you. So there is sheer hostility against the people. Sorry about that. I do not think that it serves your cause. And again, I think that all strengths, all intelligences, all personalities should be now focused and mobilized to prepare for a negotiation that will end this conflict and that will answer the dreams and the expectations of the people on the ground.
The question has been raised, the question of immunity for anybody on ground zero back in Ambazonia who may want to be part of this negotiation process, either for consultations or for pre-talks, as you have done. And they are citing the case of Abdul Karim. Abdul Karim was invited by your organization, given the visa by the Swiss in Yaoundé to attend your last pre-talks meeting. Returning to Cameroon, he was picked up in Yaoundé. And people are saying if you had made provisions for some form of immunity for anyone who wants to leave Ground Zero to attend your talks, Abdul Karim would not have been picked up. Abdul Karim is still being held behind bars today. Are you looking forward to, well, not you per se, but I'm asking whether the Swiss government is looking forward to having La République du Cameroon grant immunity to any persons back there who may want or would want to be part of the process in Swiss?
It's a major concern, and the arrest of Mr. Abdul Karim is extremely unfortunate. I think about him and his family every day. The Swiss diplomacy has mobilized all the parties that it could and is in quiet talks with the government trying to secure his release. So yes, it is a setback. It was not expected, and it is a major concern for the process. Having immunity, for the having immunity for the participants to negotiation is typically the kind of confidence-building measures that you negotiate during the talks on talks. But again, we are not there yet. We need to have.
If you have not been able to arrive that yet, with French Cameroon, and you already had, I think, 4 pre-talks with Ambazonians, and you haven't as much as yet discussed immunity with the other party. Don't you think that is lacking?
That is, as long as the process was concerning only members of the diaspora, it was not an issue in itself. That is, we had assurances that nothing would happen to them. Abdul Karim was the first participant to a meeting that actually came from Cameroon, and it is extremely unfortunate again that he was arrested. So we need to have clarity there from the government. We are working relentlessly to try and get his release. I think that we have to let now the diplomats do their job, and I can assure you that they are doing their job. We have to let the international organizations that are mandated in Cameroon to do their job. And it is absolutely clear to me that this is a major issue that needs to be solved with the government of Cameroon. And in the future, should any participants to the talks come from ground zero, we will need very firm security guarantees from them, for them.
Yeah, I think among Ambazonians, this is a very, very big issue, because the message of the arrest of Abdul Karim to any other person on ground zero is, if you go to or participate in any Swiss initiative, you will be arrested. And Ambazonians think he should be released. Abdul Karim should be released before anything takes place, because then if you need people from ground zero to participate, you're not going to see anybody.
I completely agree with you, Secretary. It does shed doubt on how this negotiation can unfold, and it's something that needs to be discussed and that needs to find a solution before we go ahead. Peace processes are never linear. Peace processes are made of progress and setback. They are made of ceasefires, and they are made of combats. They are made of agreements that are breached and agreements that are renegotiated. So I would say I'm not overly concerned about this, but I am certainly extremely concerned about the well-being of Abdul Karim. I'm concerned about him being deprived of freedom, and this is a major issue that we are that we have to deal with and that we have to solve until we move ahead.
Now, let us talk about French Cameroon coming to the table, to sit on the table. What is the guarantee? What is the guarantee that French Cameroon will come to this table? Because it doesn't appear like you are saying you have the word. You have the word of French Cameroon. We are definitely coming to sit on table at these talks. What if they don't?
Then if they don't, the process is over. It's always a risk. Now, ACT has extended a hand to the government of Cameroon, saying we are ready to negotiate. We are still expecting an answer from the government of Cameroon, and then we will know where we are going. My only certainty is there are two ways conflicts are solved. The first is a complete and definitive military victory of one party over the other, which almost never happens in context of guerrilla. Probably the only context that you can think of is the Tamil Tigers. Tamil Tigers were almost annihilated militarily by the government of Sri Lanka, but still this was after a long peace process that led to an agreement, but that some radicals within the Tigers refused, and then they got back to violence, and that unleashed then that major offensive of the Sri Lankan army. But in recent history, this is almost the only guerrilla conflict that has been solved militarily. Then the other way is through negotiation. There is always a negotiation, and depending on the balance of power of both parties, the negotiation will then be more favorable to one party or more favorable to the other, or if you have somehow a balance of power, it will be a balanced agreement. But political agreements are only the reflection of the military balance of power and the political balance of power. So all this to say that I'm I have absolutely no idea on the timing. I have no idea on the timing. I have been negotiating back in 2000 a major exchange of prisoners between the FARC, the Fuerzas Armadas de Colombia, and the government of Colombia. And this was a confidence-building measure in the frame of a peace process. The peace process took 19 more years to complete.
How many years?
The deal was signed, and much more fighting. So I have no idea on the timing.
Okay, we will get back there, but let me go back to French Cameroon commitment to this. In the absence of a categorical yes, we are committed to this, we are on the table. What if they are just buying time to keep on killing our people, killing Ambazonians? So at the end of the day, after the element of fatigue has come into the people, they declare victory and then say we're not interested in any talks. Are there no mechanisms that you, USD, the Swiss, and other international community members that support it can use to get a definite commitment from French Cameroon right now?
There is always a risk that the parties are buying time through negotiations. There is always a risk. Now, I would say it is a risk in this context if there was, for instance, as part of the talks on talks, a ceasefire. Now, ceasefires can be a way to buy time. In this case, the peace process has not affected the ability of any of the parties to apply military pressure. So I would not say, I would say buying time here is not really an issue. Buying political space or diplomatic space could be an issue, but rest assured, when I'm in Yaoundé and my friend and colleague, the ambassador of Switzerland in Yaoundé, is constantly being accused of giving visibility and buying time for the Ambazonians. And somehow we are constantly accused by the mere fact of reaching out to the Ambazonian leaders, by the mere fact of helping them to get organized and get ready for to negotiations, to give them legitimacy or to give them credit or to support them politically. So I would say you cannot expect much sincerity in a peace process. Parties negotiate because they have to negotiate, and as a mediator, you keep the freedom to walk out as a mediator if you feel that you are only being instrumentalized by the parties and that there is no willingness to ever come to a political agreement. So I'm acutely aware of that, but again, peacemaking requires patience.